So I'm going to hand this over now to my friend, Virginia Mata. She recently finished her PhD work at Incarnate Word on community organizing and action research, but specific to San Antonio itself. So from there, as recent, she took a new role at the Archdiocese in terms of social justice. And that's when I heard about her PhD work. And so I invited her to come today and to share that research with us so that we could learn what she'd learned by looking at San Antonio and its community organizing. Virginia, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Anne. I'm glad to be here and glad to be able to share my research with you all. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully y'all can see my presentation. Can you see the presentation there, or what? Let me see here.
We're seeing the speaker side of your presentation.
I'm not sure.
In the top display settings, I think it'll have a reverse screens. There's the editor.
Yeah, I'm not hearing whoever's speaking.
This is Billy.
Oh, Billy.
Yeah, Billy's doing our tech.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, we can see the slides. There.
Okay. What are you seeing? Do you see
we also see your next slide.
Yeah, I'm trying to take off that
presentation on Zoom on COPS right now. Our student did her dissertation.
So I'm not sure she was intending there.
I am forwarding
display
the
settings.
email link.
Martha, you may have your mute still off.
I muted her.
Okay. So
why don't we just use this? Virginia, I'd love to get the information. It's more important than how the slide looks.
Okay,
we can.
I'm going to go with this right. I'm just going to go with this right here. Are y'all okay with this?
Perfect.
Okay. So my research focused on, like Anne said, on civic engagement, and from the findings, I then generated a conceptual model, which kind of showed me how power is generated through civic engagement, specifically civic engagement through relational community organizing. And where I was focused on was on the community organizing conducted by COPS Metro. And so the purpose of my study, can y'all see the purpose of my study there?
Yes.
Okay. And so the purpose was basically to find out what are those key ingredients that keep ordinary citizens civically engaged in relational community organizing, specifically within COPS Metro, communities organized for public service in the Metro Alliance. And then the second aim that I was trying to figure out was how to use a critical pedagogy approach to leverage and amplify that same process to increase civic engagement, raise awareness of redlining, and engage in actions to address present-day effects of redlining. And then lastly, to better understand the connection between those two. So the research questions are aligned with the purpose of the purpose statement. I'm going to skip those because it's the same as my purpose. So why do we need a study like this? First, we need a study like this because, I mean, how many of y'all have seen these type of headlines? San Antonio is one of the most impoverished cities. San Antonio's poverty rates top the nation. San Antonio even ranks as one of the saddest cities. And the economic inequality continues, right? And so I've said this was my problem here. I wanted to learn more why this continues despite the work that's being done and so much that's taken place. In my study, I really wanted to go back to the beginning because I feel that we cannot learn something or address something without knowing the history of it. And so I went back because I was interested in redlining, and the second slide that I showed, it had the original redlining map of Bexar County. So I wanted to learn more about this. The reason for that is because I grew up in one of these areas, right? I went to school in this area, in those areas that were redlined. So I found out that what this taught me was the history is not only a study of the past, but an explanation of the present. And this mentality of has really been cemented here in San Antonio. And this is why I thought it was so important that we need to learn this. And I know that this is not the meat of my study, but this is important, and I cannot show my study or my findings without addressing the history. And every opportunity that I get, I will always address the history. And that history includes language like this that was in our deeds. These were covenant restrictions that were on our property deeds. These 2 deeds were taken from Bexar County, the Bexar County Clerk's Office, and the deed on the left has language pertaining to not allowing Mexicans or Negroes, except those that were servants, to purchase or live in these certain areas of town. And the deed on the right even goes on to say, you know, we can't have people with tuberculosis living on this side of town either, or being treated for, should I say, being treated for tuberculosis. And so this is important because this was happening at the county level already, at the local level, even before the famous redlining started. So this is a replica of the original, one of the original redlining map of San Antonio. This happened in over 200 cities across the nation. Cities were basically redlined in terms of the federal government coming in, creating a program, sending field agents and interviewing bankers, mortgage lenders, and business owners to come up with socioeconomic reports. With those socioeconomic reports, they included these survey maps, so were residential maps. And so these residential maps basically said, you know, the areas that are best for real estate investment. And so all the areas to the north were the best areas for real estate investment. And these areas in red were outlined in red, and these were considered hazardous, which is the term that they used for real estate investment. But it wasn't just real estate investment. It was real estate in everything, infrastructure, schools, and whatnot. This is an excerpt that I took out from the survey report that the field agents prepared. And in this, I'm gonna expand this because I want y'all to be able to make sure you see this. They describe they describe Mexican Americans as inferior, as lazy, non-productive. This is the language that was in that survey report that they prepared. And so I say this because we have to understand this. We have to understand that this is what we're trying to undo. This mentality that continues to exist. So I also found this kind of stuff in my action research study, which even made me more aware. It's like, wow, okay, so San Antonio in 1939 through 41 had the highest rates of tuberculosis. Well, it wasn't just San Antonio. If you look at this map, it was really Mexican Americans in San Antonio and African Americans who had the highest rates of tuberculosis. What this reminds me of today is San Antonio last year was called the diabetic foot amputation capital of the world. It's just like our new tuberculosis, right? It's just little changes to different disease. These are equity maps that the city has. Nothing's changed. The equity maps still very much mirror the red line areas. So the dark blue areas are the areas that have the lowest incomes. These dark blue areas also happen to have the lowest education, the highest asthma rates, the highest diabetes rates, the lowest wealth. And so it's still the same. The same areas continue to be impacted, even though redlining occurred decades ago. So for my study, I looked at 3 different theories. Community organizing, not per se a theory, but more like of a practice, because there is no actual community organizing theory per se. And so I looked at the evolution of community organizing down to COPS Metro. And then I looked at critical pedagogy, which is a type of education and that uses a form of learning that is meant to be like to develop a consciousness. And then action research, which is a type of research that I engaged in. This research was very productive because it really led to a lot. I mean, it led not only to the findings, but to the ability for me to create my own conceptual model out of the findings. When I had my findings, I discovered that I needed to learn more. So I needed to learn about social capital theory. I needed to learn about the different types of power that exist out there. And so my research, so I had to conduct a second literature review. These are my research participants. All of my participants were COPS Metro leaders, some of which had a lot of experience, 25 years. Sergio had 40 years of experience. Now this experience is off and on because leaders and churches, institutions, sometimes they're active and sometimes they're not active, but they've been associated with COPS Metro for quite a long time. And that's really what intrigued me. It's like, wow, how do they, what makes them stay for so long? Data collection methods, I did one-on-ones with all my participants. I did semi-structured interviews that lasted about 60 minutes each, and I held 2 civic academies. I took a bunch of pictures, not knowing that that they were actually going to come in handy, and then my notes. The way I got to my findings was through systematic data analysis of constant comparison. So I coded I did line by line coding, and then created categories that I constantly compared. And came to my my findings. My findings, theme 1 was the secret sauce, right? So what is in that secret sauce? My sub themes or the ingredients are, first of all, good Samaritans, like the people in this picture, institutional support, and a sense of spiritual and personal fulfillment, social networks, and collective action. And I'll explain those in a little bit. I'm going to explain those actually in my conceptual model. So the statements that support these findings or these ingredients, let me see, I want to make sure y'all can see these. Can you see those or can you read them? So institutional support statements like what Glenda said here, he referring to Father Pat said that I need for you to come and help me with this. And I, being the good person that I was, said, okay. And I jumped in feet first. That idea that I just didn't ask questions, I just did it. And so that institutional support is very important because it really provides that like that hope to be able to do something. And then the next thing, well, also Linda said it all depends a lot if the parish pastor is supportive. If the pastor's not behind you, it's going to be hard. But if the pastor is for you or is supportive, then it becomes a lot easier to be able to do this work. But without that support, it's very difficult. Spiritual and personal fulfillment. Victoria said, one of the things I enjoy the most is that I feel like we're doing God's work, something that God wants us to do. That's the biggest reward. Maria, it gave me purpose, something to get up for. It enriched my life, that I am a better person for it, and certainly expanded my imagination of how things could be, should be, and why they aren't. And pretty much, I had similar statements from the participants, and this is how I came to these findings. Collective action. One of the biggest activities for me that moved me in the heart was that when they helped a person to remodel her house, which is someone I know and who goes to Holy Family, that impacted me a lot. Almost everyone in the study said, seeing the results keeps me going, gives me hope, motivates me. And so this is why these folks continue to engage in this type of work. A second theme was the power of critical pedagogy. To do that, of course, I held a civic academy. Within that civic academy, I had activities that provoked people to think about their past and to think about how they grew up and traditions or family values. And so what that led to was discovering the power of stories, how those stories create solidarity, and really important, how they democratize knowledge production, because those stories actually become the knowledge that then transforms into power. This is a really good example because here we were meeting with Councilwoman Castillo, and Victoria shared her story about how she was, this is Victoria right here. She shared a story about how growing up, she remembers having to always get down if they heard like a drive-by or something, or bullets. And then now as an educator, she was talking about how she's feeling that same anxiety when they hear these drills at school, not knowing whether it's a real if it's an active shooter or not. And so that brought her to tears that brought the councilwoman to tears. In fact, she wanted to share her own story of her hardship growing up in District 5. And so that begins to create a critical consciousness. You start to think, wow, so we're not the only ones that went through this. And that in essence also energizes participants. Theme 3, a power university for the common good. These are some of the statements that I use to support this theme. This theme really, it's not new. Ernesto Cortez and many of the organizers within COPS know that the work that's being done, the training that occurs, produces in essence a university for public life, they call it. I called it a power university for the common good because we're out there doing the work that we feel that is necessary. In this example, for example, this was a corner not far from my mom's house, and we saw the need here. We heard that a family had been in a car accident and the mother had lost her baby, who was 26 months, at 26 months. And so it prompted us to ask why are there not any speed bumps there to slow down the traffic? Because it was notorious, right? We all knew that accidents kept happening here, but this accident happened on Christmas Eve, and for some reason it had a bigger impact on me. And now I had been involved in COPS Metro, and I figured, hey, we could do something. So I gathered some leaders, and this is what we did. We had the city install the speed humps. But in doing so, we also learned other things like, whoa, it turns out that the city doesn't count renters. And that's why these folks who, when we went door to door to get these petitions signed, they kept saying, well, you're wasting your time because, I mean, nobody's been able to get them. Like, they don't listen to us. They don't care about us. That's what they were telling us. And so come to find out that the reason they couldn't get them was because renters don't count. So if you live on the street and you sign a petition as a renter, your signature doesn't mean anything. So I need landlords to sign those. And so eventually I talked to the city, and the city was able to change the policy so that now I was told that now they include renters, and they got the speed humps too, and they also actually got some sidewalks too installed. Now, I talked about the conceptual model and the ingredients. These are the 5 ingredients, and this is a conceptual model that I created. These ingredients reinforce each other in the model that I created, and I'm going to go into more detail of what it means. So Good Samaritans, you have to have Good Samaritans. That's a key ingredient. And COPS Metro does a great job of finding these folks and are organizing them. So Good Samaritans, who are they? They're people who have knowledge from stories. They've seen things, they've experienced things of hardships. They've lived a difficult life, or have seen other people live a difficult life, or know of other people who have. These people are also lifelong learners. These people are not afraid. And that is why I call them the Good Samaritans, because like in the parable of the Good Samaritan, they go down to the ditch and try to address the problem, or try to help someone. So they show that courage by stepping out, not waiting for something to happen. And so in that sense, that's why I called them the Good Samaritans, because we have that compassion that moves us to act. And so regardless of where it's at. Institutional support.
5 more minutes.
Oh, well, okay. So institutional support is that support that you get from the leader or the pastor of the organization, right? The institution. That enables hope. What do? They provide moral authority, they provide resources, they provide classrooms, they provide followers. They have a following. These people already have power. In essence, it takes money to take money. Well, it takes power to make power too. And so the second key ingredient is that the work has to produce a sense of spiritual and personal fulfillment. And this is what it does in relational community organizing. The work that's being done produces this type of sense of spiritual and personal fulfillment. What that does, then, it creates social agency. What's happening here too, by the way, I forgot to mention that you're bonding with people, creating relationships with people that are pretty much common, like to you, that maybe they belong to the same parish. But now that you've created the social agency through the work, for example, practicing the iron rule, never do for others what they can do for themselves. you develop this type of personal fulfillment and spiritual fulfillment. But now you're able to create social networks. You're bridging relationships with people that are different from you, people maybe from across town or from even across a different state. And so these relationships produce solidarity, and that produces social capital. These social relationships, it's proven already that social networks produce social capital. They have value. And then social capital gives us the ability to take collective action. What collective action does, it restores our dignity. Now, in each of these steps, the stories are still being carried along. Each of these ingredients also produces what I call doses of energy. And so energy comes from energy. You can call it energy, you can call it power. I like to call it love, because really that's what it is. God is love, and it is powerful that it moves hearts and moves us inwardly to act outwardly. And so these are the ingredients that I identified that produce the power to create change in the community, power for the community, power with each other, and power within, and then ultimately the staying power to sustain the organization. And this type of power is also the power that it's needed to challenge the 3 different types of power, specifically hidden and invisible power. So some of the things that I recommended, that we integrate critical pedagogy approaches for organizers, have activities that generate critical thinking, and make sure to be very careful with barriers in terms of language and time, and being transparent when you're doing the work of organizing. Spreading and rotating leadership opportunities. This one is super important, because this is how you're going to scale the organization. And for policymakers, invest in community organizations that promote social agency and social capital, promote a culture that promotes civic engagement in the workplace for employment, provide tax incentives and create creative incentives for businesses to integrate civic participation, and create and support more collaborative civic spaces and a culture that values the stories of people. Let me just leave you with this last thought. This was I think it was my last sentence on my dissertation. Together we can dismantle harmful structures, build new ones that uplift everyone, and ensure everyone has an opportunity to thrive. The question is, are we willing to do the work to weave the social fabric of America into what it was always meant to be? A vibrant tapestry of the diverse colors, united by the intertwined stories of many to make one. And that is the key, that we have to come together. And yes, it means facing the truth. And yes, the truth is not always kind, but we're here not to point fingers, but to work together to do better. And I'll conclude that and see if anyone has any questions or if you want me to go back to any slide.
Wow, that was amazing. And I want to touch on a couple things and move in a direction. You might want to look into chat as well. Off-Your Catholic has made a great affirmation. Doug Beach asked if we could get a copy of the slides, the PowerPoint. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, this was your dissertation, so there is that question. I am going to take a brief pause. It's 8:29. So for those among us who might be needing to move on with their day, thank you for being with us. And I hope you come next week. We've got a really exciting speaker, a retired city manager from here in Texas, couple communities, cities here in Texas, where he recognized that community organizing needed to be taught and learned among elected officials as well as within the community. And anyway, I'm looking forward to having him with us next Thursday. So to move forward a bit, first I want to ask if there are any questions. We're getting thoughts in chat, which is great. From our probably youngest among us, Darsh High School. That was an amazing, super fascinating study. Redlining is a systemic effect of racism in America, and the work you're doing is great. Kendra Lee, also useful and comprehensive study. So this study was directly on Cobb's Metro. It would be fascinating, and maybe another doctoral student will pick up the next step, but do a similar kind of research on other community organizing models that we have here in San Antonio, because there are others who've been around a long time. So that would be, an idea to plant in our brains for people who are looking for more research and to help all of us become stronger in our city. Two things actually. I loved the slides, the circular one. And I just kind of wanted to remind people, those aren't necessarily in an order and they repeat themselves. It's a spinning kind of thing that happens. But two earlier things that you said really struck my ears and the importance of them. Not the first one, but later on, seeing the results and the importance of what that does for people who are involved in the work to actually see the results.
Mhm.
I even add to that to encourage people to look for the results. Sometimes we're working so hard in community that things are moving so fast that we think that we're not getting anywhere because we're not seeing, they're there, but we're also not looking. We're moving too fast. So I appreciated the storytelling, right? Because the storytelling slows us down and it helps us to look, oh, but look what it did in her life.
Mhm.
That's a result, but we might not have taken time to see it, recognize it, and then to celebrate it. That's also important in that cycle, because we can look at lots of long-term organizing, slavery, and, let's just make the big list. Those things did not change overnight. Those were all huge series of many stories that we might be able to see a little bit easier looking back. But for those working today, to take the time to look. Now, the other one that kind of takes me into a potential conversation here at 8:33, but one of the earliest things that you said, Virginia, and this is very, I think this was King, knowing history before you know to go forward. And I think it was King, somebody can correct me, but in order to go, forward, we must first know where we've been. And then you went through redlining, that geographic, economic landscaping that has impacted us. And NIMBYism, I don't know why, but I'd never put redlining and not in my backyard mental geography together. But in that redlining process, as we know, right, that was power, that was economics, how we perceived other people, where we placed other people, where people ended up being and stuck. But I know from last week, Bill Glenn, who's with us, he, with the rest of us, did his old school homework on the effort that he's been working on. And so I'm going to kind of invite him in, if that's okay. But one thing that he struggles with in his effort is not in my backyard. And for some reason this morning, listening to what you said, I would suggest that NIMBYism is an outcome of redlining. And it's our mental geography and how we perceive others and how we still don't want people who are different than us or whatever in our backyard. We want to shore it up, right? Bill, are you with us? You were.
I am.
Virginia, might stop sharing your screen. We can have a conversation here if you're open to But I wanted to invite Bill. He reported in yesterday that he worked on his assignment last week. Bill, could you just quickly just name the effort that you're working on, first of all?
Well, first of all, Virginia, thank you. It's excellent, excellent work. And it's
you.
reassuring to me because some of the principles that you're talking about there we're working with. And it seems to be making a little bit of a difference. We have a series of apartments. They're very small. They're near large subdivisions. And these apartments are specifically created for people who are living with a mental illness to have a safe place where they can receive the support they need and the understanding and caring of their neighbors, because their neighbors are also living with a mental illness. And we'd like to have more of these apartment complexes. We think this is the right idea. Small, purpose-built, and near things like grocery, medical, police protection, so on and so forth. But that means that they are next to large subdivisions. And of course, there's a certain amount of disclosure that's required when we build these things. And that naturally leads to interest and concern by the neighborhood. And so one of the ways that we address that is we follow the steps you outlined, which is we tell the story of people who are impacted. We acknowledge the fact that almost everybody who has a family of any size has someone that's living with a mental illness. And we understand the impact of that. And then finally, we're not very big. We're not trying to build 60 units. We're not trying to build a multi-story thing. It's very small. And the people that live there have to live under a certain number of rules as they would in a subdivision with a homeowners association. So we talk like we are like them. And when we encourage them to meet by visiting the current apartment complexes, they meet people who they recognize. And so the idea is kind of to shift their thinking, develop the fact that it's one community, not a bunch of separate people with different lifestyles. So in that regard, we find it helpful. Where we find it challenging is it doesn't really fit into the model of building things that is going on in the city. It's too small. And so one of the things we're doing is trying to educate those people who make decisions about funding and support to support us. Did I cover enough, Anne?
Now, I would suggest that the effort is about, I put it in chat, about housing and with those who are in need of community and resourcing in terms of mental illness and wellness. And the challenge that I hear, so I'm gonna let Virginia talk about the challenge that I hear is NIMBYism, but it's also the size of the efforts in such a large city, right? I suppose, and I'm going to lob this then to Virginia, my questions would be right in line with what's around the circle. Where have all of those things been engaged? Virginia, what do you think? And I hope everybody's applying this to their own efforts.
You're muted, Virginia.
Isn't that frustrating?
Okay, sorry about that. This mouse is
Okay.
not cooperating with me. Yeah, I mean, I do love the idea that you are incorporating the stories because those stories are really important, and then going to the people to get the answers that we need, right? The knowledge that's needed. Because I think we have to remember that stories, they can become knowledge and power once we act on them. And so if we use those stories, we can they kind of really transform into power to create the change needed. So that's a really big one. But in terms of of the organization itself, you're producing some of those benefits for the people involved. And so I think that's that works. But yeah, there's make sure, like I guess, that you have that support and that whoever's leading that's being you're bringing more people into it, and always trying to really grow, because one of the things that's really important is collaborating with as many people as you possibly can, because that'll get you closer to your goal eventually. It might not look like it, but it will.
Thank you.
Put some other questions into chat. And my thought to everybody's effort, but to Bill's, along with you, who are all the other good Samaritans, engaged with your effort? Who's your team, right?
Right.
And then going around the circle, what institutional support do you have? And do you still need, discern what institutional support? Because I don't think, Bill, that you're doing this like within a congregational setting. You might want to engage more of that. I don't know, but seems to me that you mentioned something about council persons, etc. Weren't you going
I
to do
am.
something?
Yeah, there's 3 asks. The first ask is that the council people get to know us and support our effort, so that when we meet with the homeowners association, they're on the positive side of it and supportive. Secondly, we need changes in, like you mentioned, Virginia, in your effort, which is there are some rule changes that have to occur to allow these things to be built on any kind of scale. And thirdly, there are not enough people in the community right now who can navigate this process. Because of the size of it, it really is not something that large corporations or folks who build really get involved with. They're too small, they're too specific. So we need some navigation, and that means we need some startup money, some pre-development money. And so those are the kinds of things we're trying to get political leaders interested in supporting, because the money's there. It's just being used otherwise. So we need a little bit of it to be used for us. And that brings me to the last point. To do one of these projects is not that expensive when you think about building things. And so there's not a lot of return on investment, especially early on. And so for the money, it's not really feasible. So what we do is we engage the people who are going to benefit from this directly. And that includes some of the people in these subdivisions, because this particular condition means at some point they can't live with their family. They have to live somewhere, and they would like them to live nearby. And so a small apartment complex makes sense. But there's a contribution that has to be made there to make it happen. You have to become a little bit political. You have to raise some money. You have to do all those things. And so generally across the board, the team is made up mostly of people like people from NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, who are personally invested. And then we hope the community is, because this is upstream. This is preventative. If you can help people move into these places, they become less of a problem to the community. Because if they're homeless or they're not where they can receive proper medical care, they tend to run into the police. They tend to have more health problems. That's kind of the concept. So speaking, Anne, to your point, when we first began this effort, we visited with a number of faith-based organizations in an effort to see if they would like to help us not only present this, but also offer the land, educate the community. And so that's gone on to a certain extent.
We've got less than a minute, and Peter has his hand up. So one more comment. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Virginia. Excellent work. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to ask a question of Will. Just very interested in what city council district is the project in? What part of the city are you working that project?
There are 2 districts right now. We have 3 apartment complexes. what I'd like to do is put a couple in each district. And so what I'm doing is visiting with each one of the council people to talk to them about what this is. For those who have one in their district, that's part of it, but also just to encourage that this be spread out across the community, because the number of people living with a mental illness who cannot get well and go back and live their lives, but who are affected personally and vocationally and financially and so forth, they have a long-term problem. They need a place to live that's going to support them.
Yeah, being on the housing bond, I can relate with this permanent supportive housing and more of that type of housing being developed across the city and diversifying it to the different districts. That's why I was interested, where are you working that? Because I'm very intrigued with the mental health focus, but District 4 is where I'm really focusing in my work. And I just wanted to know if you're in District 4 or nearby, or what district are you in?
Yeah,
I want
right
to
now
suggest
I'm
that
working.
you guys, hey guys, I want to suggest
Yeah.
that you, there's an amazing conversation
Mhm.
We got to
offline.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's 8:46.
Virginia, thank you. And Ann, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
I want to ask Virginia if she has one last thought, but I want to ask one last question to everyone and Bill. A very basic question. Are you doing this effort by yourself?
No,
No, you can take the answer and have that conversation with Peter. I'm
Okay.
going to Virginia. It's for everybody. We do not do these efforts of community organizing by ourselves. So if you're going to see council persons, you need to find other people to go with you. Virginia, a last thought for us.
Just don't forget the power of stories. Whenever you have an opportunity to meet with a council member or someone with power that you're hoping to influence, bring someone with a story or bring a powerful story with you.